Recently, I had, hello, GoldSim users. I'm here to present just a very simple concept. There was a question that came into our forum today asking how can I keep track of the age of a process that's going on in the GoldSim model? So my first reaction was, well, it's very easy to calculate the age by using an integrator. Um, so let me start with that, and then I'll show you um, a much simpler method that uses a GoldSim container to calculate the age for you. So I'll start with the integrator option. This is kind of just doing it from scratch. This will always work. Let me show it to you. Here we have a model in which we want to start a process called um, rec- it's a reclaiming some area. This was the question that came to me. This is probably a construction site or something where they're reclaiming some land for some purpose, and they're keeping track of the process of increasing their reclaimed area over time, and they want to know how long this process is going on for, and the process doesn't start until sometime in the future during the simulation. So what I'll do is I'll start with this right container that says using integrator and just show you the basic kind of brute force way to calculate this, like you would a lot of different things in GoldSim. So first I had to set up a model that kind of simulates a fake process of increasing reclaimed area. You could relate this to anything. Maybe it's a rate of change of a water level, or maybe it's maybe you're keeping track of how much rain is falling over time, and you're integrating it, something like that. What we're doing is we're saying, I want to keep track of the age of this process. When we start reclaiming the area, I want to trigger something in Goldson that says, okay, now start keeping track of how old that process is. So I have this little selector in here that says when the date of the simulation is greater than or equal to the start reclaimed value, which is, this is a user defined value right here. This is just some date. I just said July 1st, 2023. Okay, so when our date of our simulation, this is a run property called date time. Okay, just so you know, that is available over here when you select show all element sub items, go up here to local properties, and you will see a date time output. That's a system property that's available to you in all GoldSim models. All right, so we have this expression that says if the current date of the simulation is greater than or equal to our defined start time, then it's a true output. Otherwise, it's a false output. Using that, we can then start doing things like, well, let's calculate the amount of reclaimed area we have using some random rate that I've got in the model using this if statement of reclaimed on. If the reclaimed is on, meaning we are currently under operation, then we will calculate this rate over time. Otherwise, it's 0. So this would result in the total area over time that has accumulated. Also, in addition, we can calculate the age using an integrator very simply, just by saying with a unit of time, make sure there's a units here in time. And I'm using a 1-day time step in this model. So I'm going to say if we have reclaim turned on right now, then we're just going to integrate a value of 1 day every day. You could also say 1 year over year, or just one. It just means it's going to increment by one of the unit we're working with per unit of time. So this can be a little confusing, this part right here. I don't really like that very much. It may not be robust for all situations if you have different time steps, sizes, and things. So just to avoid all of that, I would say a better way to do this would be using the built-in functionality of a container. So here we have this other way to do it. If I go into this using conditional containers approach, what we have is a container that is now, you see it's red, that indicates that it has the conditionality feature turned on. When you check this, then it means we have some extra outputs available on the container. It turns out one of the outputs available to us very conveniently tucked away into this folder called conditionality is called duration. And this is precisely the thing that we want if we are able to tell the container when to start operating and when to stop operating if we need to. That's the beauty of a conditional container. So what we do here is we have an event that we trigger. This is called a triggered event. It means we just define a triggering mechanism to tell it when to trigger. It could trigger multiple times during a simulation or just one time, which is what happens in our case. If I click on the trigger button, it says at date. It's just one of the types of triggers you can have. on the date that we tell it to start reclaiming. That's the date that you enter in that other element that I showed you. So the user enters a date here, and then on exactly that date during the simulation, Goldson would fire off a trigger at this point, and it turns out that a container can be triggered to become active, and that's in the conditionality tab. Since we have checked the box for conditionality, go to this tab. Activation is on event start reclaiming. So that's the event we just created right here. So that tells this container to become active, and the things inside of it will then begin to calculate at the time it becomes active, which is exactly how we want to operate this thing. So if we go in here to this container, then we can start reclaiming the area using some random number. This random number is just a surrogate for your real model where you might be calculating something like this. In our case, we resample every single day of the simulation, a new value. So let's just imagine a random number every single day. Um, this is just a placeholder, right? So that is what feeds our integrator in which we were calculating the reclaimed area in place. This is something you wanted to know, but in reality, none of this really matters in here to our model in which we're trying to calculate just the age. So the age is really just going to the output port of this container and looking at the duration output. That's the one we want. We're going to connect that to this reference here of this expression element called age. So we just add this expression, put in the duration of that container, and that's the answer we want. So here's a chart that shows the reclaimed area, just FYI, not really very useful for what we're talking about, but the important part is the age, and we show the two together so that you can just visualize how we're calculating the age, and we only do that when we start uh, uh, increasing the reclaimed area. In other words, when the reclaiming operation begins, then we start adding age, and that's you can see that in this chart down here. The red line is the reclaimed area. It's on the Y1 axis. The age is on the Y2 axis. And you can see here we don't start incrementing the age until we start the project. And then you can see if we go 2 years into the future, which would be July 2025, we're at approximately 2 years here. And let's see if I can hover over the right line. Oh, I had it, but another thing we can do is just turn off the area for a second here. Okay, so then if we go to July 2025, you see that we are hitting 2 years old. So that makes sense, it checks out.